Today, I'm going to tell you a story so heavy with truth that even the desert tried to swallow it. Between scorched earth and endless sky, in a frontier where mercy was rare and survival came at a price, two broken paths were about to cross. This was a place where the past never stayed quiet, and where one small object, long forgotten, would reopen a wound the land itself remembered. Because sometimes, a single heartbeat is enough to start a war. Before we begin this journey, don't forget to hit like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. If she kept moving, she would either reach a new life or collapse trying. The desert storm showed no mercy. Wind tore at her face like a living thing, hurling sand and rain sideways with savage force. The horizon vanished into a wild blur of mud and water. Her boots sank deep with every step, clay gripping her ankles while the shredded hem of her wedding dress dragged through the red sludge behind her like a burial flag. Alara Whitcomb tightened the shawl around her shoulders, but the cold cut straight through the wool, as if it wasn't there at all. Her hair clung to her skin, soaked and heavy, burning her eyes. Through the storm, she could barely make out the thin trail threading between mesquite and juniper. Miles Rowan, the stagecoach driver, had left her at the pass, his voice swallowed by thunder. 2 miles. That's all I ride. She repeated it inside her head, over and over. A prayer counted in footsteps. Behind her waited Boston's polished cages, her father's iron stare, and a marriage she'd fled before the vows could close around her throat. Ahead lay Red Mesa territory, a stretch of nowhere where no one knew her name. No piano lessons, no drawing room smiles, no judge's house with echoing floors built on obedience. Her foot slipped on a slick stone, and she went down hard, pain biting through her knee. The storm screamed louder than the wedding bells that had waited for her back east. A laugh broke from her chest, half sob, half madness. It sounded untamed. "If I keep walking," she whispered, "I'll find a new life. Or I won't." She forced herself upright and stepped forward again. Every stride felt like defiance. Somewhere beyond the rain stood the man whose letter she had answered with trembling hands and borrowed courage. Thorne Kess, a rancher, a widower, a stranger. She wasn't chasing love. She was chasing a place not shaped by someone else's rules. Lightning split the sky, and for one breath of time she saw it. The Kess Ranch rising from the darkness. A weathered house with a wraparound porch. A barn crouched behind it, cottonwoods bending low beneath the wind. Then the night swallowed it whole. Cold burned her lungs by the time she reached the gate. Rain slid from her lashes, blurring the world into streaks of silver. Her fingers closed around the iron latch, numb skin stinging as metal bit back. Her thoughts spun, her father's unmoved eyes. Preston Avery's hand resting on hers at the altar. The echo of her heels as she ran across the cathedral floor. She didn't knock. She stood there instead, a soaked bride with a secret. The silver pocket watch hidden in her skirt felt impossibly heavy, the last piece of the man who had ruined everything. And perhaps the man who might unknowingly save her. A door creaked open. Lantern light spilled across the porch. A tall figure filled the frame, shoulders squared against the storm. A rifle leaned within reach beside the wall. Rain drove between them like a curtain. "What the hell are you doing out here?" His voice was calm, steady, neither welcoming nor alarmed. "You're alone." Fear tightened in Alara's throat. "Thorne Kess." He didn't answer. He stepped into the light, and she saw the truth the letters hadn't carried. He was older than she'd imagined. Deep lines etched his mouth and eyes. Gray streaked his dark hair. His jaw was set like the land itself, unyielding. A man who no longer expected good things to find him. She straightened her spine. "My name's Elara Whitcomb. I came from Boston." We wrote to each other. His gaze swept over her rain-washed face, the torn wedding dress, the blood sliding down her shin. Something flickered behind his eyes. Concern, calculation. But his voice stayed rough. "You're not what I pictured." "I'm here," she said evenly, the wind whipping her words. "That's all I have." For a moment, neither moved. The storm battered the lantern, making the flames shudder. Then Thorne exhaled slowly and stepped aside. "Get inside before the desert finishes what it started." Warmth struck her like a blow, dry air thick with smoke, horse, and sage. Only then did she realize how violently she was shaking as water pooled beneath her boots. Thorne shut the door, set his rifle aside, and walked into the small kitchen without a word. The house was orderly, shaped by hands that believed chaos could be controlled. He returned with a wool blanket and a clean cloth. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the chair by the hearth. His voice was rough, but not cruel. She obeyed, wrapping the blanket around herself like armor. When he knelt to inspect her bleeding knee, the world tilted. She wasn't used to men kneeling unless it meant power. "I can handle it," she said quickly. "You'll make it worse." His hands were calloused, but careful. He cleaned the wound without hesitation and wrapped it tight with practiced ease. For several long seconds, only the storm spoke. "Why would anyone cross that hell alone?" he asked. "Because Boston stopped being home," she said softly. "A long time ago." He looked up, no pity in his eyes, only understanding. There was no pity in his eyes, only recognition. The frontier wasn't built for dreams either. "That's fine," she murmured. "I've had my share of fairy tales." When he finished tying the cloth, he leaned back on his heels. His gaze drifted to something half hidden in the fold of her skirt, a glint of silver. The pocket watch. He reached toward it, paused, then brushed it lightly with his fingertips. Like a man touching a memory he wasn't sure still belonged to him. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Her breath caught. "It was my father's. He bought it years ago." Without a word, Thorne Kess slipped a hand inside his vest and drew out another watch. Identical. Same shape, same engraving. He snapped it open. A soft tune spilled into the room, low and aching. The air shifted, as if time itself had tilted. Elara Whitcomb opened hers. The same lullaby answered. For a heartbeat, the storm outside faded into nothing. Then Thorne's jaw tightened. "My brother made these," he said. "Only two." She stared into the fire. "I didn't know." The words struck hard, but his voice stayed even. "It didn't need two." She lifted her eyes to meet his. "Maybe not. But I didn't come here to lie." He rose slowly, the chair groaning beneath the weight of what hung between them. "Then why are you here, Miss Whitcomb?" She could have given him a dozen answers. Fear, guilt, escape. She could have told him everything and let it burn clean in one breath. But something in his stare, weathered, dangerous, shaped by loss, made her hold the truth back. Thorne exhaled, long and quiet, the sound of a man who'd buried too much already. "There's a spare room down the hall," he said. "Get some rest, you'll need it." That night she lay in the narrow bed, staring at the rafters scented with cedar and rain. Her body ached down to the bone. Her nerves refused to settle. Beneath the blanket, her fingers closed around the watch. Her father's corruption. His silence. His lies. The real reason she'd crossed half a country. Thorne didn't know yet, but he would. Thunder rolled outside like an old argument refusing to die. From down the hall came the faint scrape of pen against paper. Thorn writing, maybe in a ledger, maybe in a letter meant for no one. The sound twisted something in her chest. She shut her eyes, but sleep stayed distant. Because she understood now, tomorrow, she wouldn't just be a stranger at a ranch. She'd be standing inside a man's buried war. And somewhere deep within that storm-worn house, a melody breathed through the dark. 2 watches, 2 ghosts, 1 truth. Later, Thorn sat alone by the dying fire. His brother's watch rested in his palm, ticking softly. He stared into the flames and whispered like a prayer meant for the dead. "Why the hell does she have yours, Caleb?" The wind answered with a low, restless moan. Morning arrived on the smell of coffee. Burnt, sharp, unforgiving. It slid down the hallway beneath her door like smoke from a slow fire. Alara opened her eyes. Outside the narrow window, dawn bruised the sky in pale pink and fading violet. She hadn't truly slept. Her body had given up somewhere in the night, but her thoughts replayed everything. The storm, Thorn's voice, the twin watches ticking in the dark. She sat up carefully, muscles stiff. The room was small but orderly. Bare walls, a narrow dresser, 1 chair, no photographs, no softness, only purpose. It suited him. She splashed water from the pitcher onto her face and studied herself in the cracked mirror. Mud still clung to the ends of her hair. Her eyes looked older than they had 2 days earlier. Maybe they were. At the foot of the bed lay a folded dress Thorn had left. Plain blue cotton, worn thin but clean. No corset, no lace, no Boston. As she stepped into the hall, the weight of the watch settled against her hip again, steady as a second heartbeat. Even here, in this forgotten stretch of land, the past hadn't released her. Thorn stood at the stove, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. He didn't turn. "There's bread on the table," he said. "It's cold, but it'll fill you." She crossed the room barefoot, the floorboards barely whispering beneath her steps. The chair creaked as she sat, wrapping her chilled fingers around the mug. He finally glanced her way. "You look better than you did last night." Her brow lifted. "That's supposed to be kind?" He gave a half shrug and took a sip. His face was stone, eyes carved into it. They ate without speaking. Outside, the storm had passed, but the house still groaned with its memory. Moisture clouded the windows, and the hearth fire had burned down to glowing embers. Silence held, not empty, not easy, but no longer hostile. Alara cleared her throat. "I didn't get the chance to thank you. For last night." Thorn leaned back in his chair, arms folding across his chest. "Wasn't charity. I don't let people bleed out on my porch." She offered a small smile, though it never reached her eyes. "Still, thank you." He gave a single nod. "You carry your pain quiet," he said. "That's uncommon." Alara met his stare. "I've had years of practice." He studied her another moment, then rose and crossed to a narrow cabinet beside the window. From inside, he took out the second pocket watch, the twin to hers, and set it gently on the table between them. "I don't believe in coincidence, Miss Whitcomb." "Neither do I," she replied. Thorn flipped the watch open. The soft lullaby drifted through the room again, low and aching. "My brother built these," he said. "Only 2. 1 for his wife, 1 for their boy." Alara lowered her eyes to her hands. "And the fire." He didn't speak right away. "The law said his death was an accident." Then he continued, voice tightening. But the fire started the day after Caleb Kess refused to sell his land to a man named Vernon Slate. Her breath caught. The name struck too close. He owns most of this territory now, Thorne said. Land, cattle, banks. If he doesn't hold it already, he's circling it. My brother wouldn't sell. His jaw flexed. A week later, he was gone, and the law did nothing. She already knew the answer, but asked anyway. Why? The judge in Boston dismissed the claim, said the evidence wasn't strong enough. Witness statements disappeared. So did the sheriff. Her stomach twisted. That judge had been her father. Thorne's eyes lifted to her. And now that judge's daughter shows up on my porch with Caleb's watch in her pocket. Alara's voice stayed calm, though it cost her. I didn't know when I boarded the stagecoach. He didn't blink. But you know now. She nodded. I don't need perfection, she said. I just need to be honest. Thorne looked away, eyes settling on the faded wallpaper near the stove. When he spoke again, his voice was low. Then you should understand this. If you came here to run from something, that's fine. But if you came thinking you could fix what's broken, don't. He turned back to her. This place doesn't need redemption. It needs survivors. I'm not here to fix anything, Alara said quietly. I just want to know what's real, what's mine, what's worth holding on to. He watched her for a long moment. Then his head tipped slightly, as if she'd passed some test he hadn't meant to give. Good, he said, because around here, truth weighs heavier than bullets. They finished eating in silence. The air between them wasn't warm, and it wasn't friendly, but it was no longer sharp. Two people standing at the edge of something neither had named yet. Thorne rose, picked up both watches, then handed hers back. You keep it, he said. Something tells me it's safer with you. She hesitated before slipping it into her pocket. The weight felt different now, not just a relic of the past, but something breathing, something tied. Thorne grabbed his hat from the peg by the door. I've got business in town. You're welcome to ride along, he added. Or stay here, your choice. Alara stood. I'll come. His brow lifted. You sure? I need to see the place for myself. A pause, then a faint nod. Brave. She shrugged. Just tired of hiding. They rode without speaking. The storm had left the road thick with wet clay and shallow pools. Her boots pressed damp against the stirrups, while the horse beneath her shifted at every gust of wind. Navajo Edge emerged from the brush like a secret worn thin. Feed store, saloon, general shop, chapel, sheriff's post. Dust still drifted along the main road, like a ghost reluctant to move on. Thorne dismounted outside a weather-beaten storefront. Mercer's General, he said. If you need anything, this is where you ask. She followed him inside. A bell rang overhead. The place smelled of tobacco and dry timber. A man with sharp eyes and dark skin turned from behind the counter. Well, I'll be damned, he said. Thorne Kess walking in with company. Thorne grunted. Rylan Mercer, this is Alara Whitcomb. She's new to the territory. Rylan smiled easily. Welcome, miss. Hope he's treated you better than he treats that saddle of his. Thorne rolled his eyes. We're not married, Rylan. But she crossed a storm to get here, Rylan said with a wink toward her. That counts for something. Alara returned the smile politely. Then her attention drifted to the window. Across the street stood a tall man in a fine coat and a polished hat. Watching. He wasn't watching the store. He was watching her. Rylan Mercer followed Alara's gaze and lowered his voice. "That's Vernon Slate," he muttered. "Smile like a preacher, hands like a vulture." Alara's stomach tightened. She had heard that name whispered behind closed doors in her father's study. Spoken like a warning, never aloud. She had never imagined she'd see the man standing in open daylight. Slate tipped his hat politely, then turned away. Thorne stepped in close beside her. "We'll keep this visit short." When they stepped back onto the street, the wind rose again, carrying dust and something worse beneath it. Alara felt the watch press against her hip. Not just its weight, but something deeper beginning to stir under the cracked desert ground. Behind her, Ryland's words echoed. "A man who smiles like that has already chosen what he plans to take." This wasn't Boston anymore. And this wasn't only about the past, it was about the future fighting its way to the surface. The first thing Alara noticed about Merelda Knox was the shotgun resting beside her rocking chair. The second was that she never stopped knitting when they stepped onto the porch. The old woman sat like she'd been built into the wood itself, sharp-boned, steel-eyed, silver hair braided down her back. Her fingers moved faster than thought. A tin cup of black coffee steamed at her side while the desert wind tugged at her braid. "You brought her," Merelda said without looking up. Thorne sighed. "Wasn't exactly optional." "I didn't say it was." Merelda finally glanced at Alara. "Let's see your hands." Caught off guard, Alara blinked. "My hands?" "Hands, girl." Merelda set the needles down. "You can learn everything about a person from their hands. Lies, hurt, hope. It all shows sooner or later." Alara held them out, palms up. Merelda studied them carefully. Soft, but not spoiled. Burn scar on the thumb. Kitchen work. She shifted closer. Left pinky healed wrong. Her gaze moved again. "And a callus here, where a pen used to sit. You wrote a lot." "I did," Alara said. Merelda nodded once. "Good. Means you think before you speak." Thorne smirked behind her, but stayed quiet. They sat on the porch as the sun dragged itself higher. Navajo Edge stirred awake. Smoke lifting from chimneys, dogs barking somewhere beyond the street. Alara sipped bitter coffee, while Merelda and Thorne spoke in clipped sentences, the kind shared by people who had buried too much together to bother explaining it. Eventually, the talk drifted to the watches. Merelda's fingers froze. "You're telling me the girl walked in wearing Caleb's lullaby in her coat?" Alara nodded and set the silver watch on the small table. Merelda lifted it gently. She turned it over, opened the back panel, and let the melody breathe into the morning air. "You were just a baby when Caleb made this," she murmured. Not to Alara, but to the watch itself. Said one would keep his wife steady, and one would help his boy sleep. Her eyes clouded for a moment. Fire took them both. "That's what we believed," Thorne said. He glanced at Alara. "Tell her." Alara hesitated, then spoke. "My father was the judge who dismissed the case." Merelda's mouth tightened. "Whitcomb," she said. "Yes." "I didn't know," Alara said quietly. "Not when I wrote Thorne, not when I came here." "But you know now," Merelda replied, flat as stone. "I do." Merelda studied her for a long time. Then she leaned back in her chair. "Then maybe you're exactly who was meant to show up." Thorne lifted a brow. "You serious?" Merelda waved him off. "You think this land's cursed. Think Caleb's death left you the last man standing." She looked back at Alara. "But maybe the world's got a sense of humor. Send in his bloodline's watch back through the hands of the daughter of the man who helped bury him." "I'm not here to undo anything," Alara said softly. "I just want to understand what no one ever explained. Merelda nodded. Then listen close. She leaned forward. Slate didn't just kill a man. He killed roots. Thorn stiffened. He wanted that land because of what Caleb found, Merelda continued. Copper veins running straight through the canyon wall. Alara inhaled sharply. He had proof. More than proof, Merelda said. Maps, contracts. But when the fire came, it all burned. Or so we thought, Thorn said quietly. He turned to Alara. The note you found, it was inside the watch, wasn't it? She nodded. A folded bank draft, made out to my father from one of Slate's holding companies. No signature. But the handwriting, Thorn said. I recognize it, Alara replied. I saw enough of Slate yesterday. His S curls like a snake. Thorn's expression darkened. Merelda leaned forward again. If that paper survived, what else did? Thorn rested his shoulder against the porch post. Then we need to find the old workshop. He looked toward the barn in the distance. Caleb built a cellar beneath it, he said. Used it for storage. He met Alara's eyes, and maybe for hiding the truth. Slate probably tore this place apart years ago, Merelda warned. Turned every board inside out. But he never knew about the false wall in the root cellar, Thorn said quietly. Only me. Caleb. He stopped. Merelda finished the thought for him. And Aisha. Silence settled. Alara looked between them. Aisha was Caleb's wife. Merelda nodded. Red Mesa, stronger than any soul I've ever known. Slate didn't just take her husband. Her jaw tightened. He tried to erase her whole bloodline, called her land a savage's dream, said he'd own it all and bury the name with it. Alara swallowed hard. What about their child? Thorn looked away. Nico, he said. She blinked. What? He turned back toward her. His name was Nico. Just a baby when the fire took the house. They claimed no one made it out. Merelda's eyes narrowed. Except we never found the child's body. Just burned bone fragments. Nothing certain. Alara's hand drifted instinctively to the watch in her pocket. Merelda reached over and gently closed Alara's fingers around it. Sometimes the dead leave messages behind, she said. We just don't learn how to read them the first time. Later that afternoon, they rode toward the canyon's edge. The old barn still stood, sun-bleached, half-collapsed, beams groaning whenever the wind pressed against them. Behind it lay the remains of the workshop, charred timbers and rusted hinges sinking into the dirt. The cellar entrance sat buried beneath debris and scrub. Thorn crouched, pulling away tangled sage with rough hands. Help me with these boards. Alara dropped beside him. The smell of earth and ash filled her lungs. Together they pried the planks loose, revealing a narrow stairway descending into darkness. I'll go first, Thorn said. I'm coming, she answered. He paused. You sure? She met his eyes. I didn't walk through a desert storm and lie to a judge just to turn back now. They descended together. The air below was cool and damp. Stone walls wept moisture. Dust coated everything, except one section at the back. A false wall. Thin pine boards sealed with packed mud. Thorn traced the edge. Here. He pulled one loose. Behind it sat oilcloth-wrapped bundles, ledgers, hand-drawn maps, journals browned with age, and something else. A small wooden horse, hand-carved. Thorn lifted it slowly. His fingers trembled. Nico's, he whispered. He used to chew the tail when he was teething. Alara opened one of the journals. Inside were sketches of mineral veins, canyon markers, land boundaries, rock samples, names scrawled in red ink. Her breath caught. This is enough to destroy Vernon's slate. Thorne's jaw tightened. If we can get it to someone he hasn't bought. She closed the journal carefully. Then we take it to the people who still believe in truth. He studied her. You think any of them are left? She held his gaze. They have to be. Or what are we fighting for? After a long moment, he nodded. We'll head into town at first light. He counted quietly. Start with Rylan, then Merelda, then Sheriff Garen Slate. Alara frowned. The sheriff. One of the few decent men left, Thorne said. If he's still standing. They climbed out of the cellar as the wind kicked up red dust around them. The sun sank low, painting the desert in fire and blood. Alara looked back at the barn. Thorne, she said softly. He turned. That lullaby. It was written for a boy who died in the fire. Or so you believed. His face stilled. She continued gently. But if Isha survived, maybe Nico did too. He didn't answer, but his eyes did. Hope cut deeper than grief when you'd buried it long enough. And in that moment, something shifted. Not only between them, but across the land itself, as if the desert had been holding its breath for years. Tomorrow they would look for Sheriff Garen. But tonight, they stood at the edge of a truth that refused to stay buried. The saloon smelled of stale whiskey, worn leather, and secrets best kept quiet. Thorne warned her before they stepped inside. You'll hear things you won't like. Don't believe all of it, but don't forget any of it either. Alara nodded and followed him through the swinging doors. Inside, Navajo Edge's only drinking hole was already half full, though the day was young. Old ranch hands slouched beside fresh-faced dusters. Two gamblers worked a far table, cards sliding beneath deadened eyes. Near the wall, a woman in a faded red dress sang softly beside a dust-choked piano. No one bothered tuning it anymore. Thorne guided her to the bar, where Rylan Mercer spoke in low tones with a broad-shouldered man wearing a 6-point star on his chest. Sheriff Garen Slate. His face was smooth. His eyes were not. Sharp, measuring, watching. Sheriff Garen Slate spotted Thorne and gave a short nod. Didn't expect to see you drag a lady into a place like this, Kess. She ain't mine, Thorne replied evenly. She's got her own reasons for standing here. The sheriff's gaze shifted to Alara, slow and unblinking. You're the woman from Boston. The one folks say brought ghosts with her. Alara met his stare without lowering her eyes. I'm not a ghost, she said. I'm the one who finally noticed them. That earned her a measured smile. Fair enough. Thorne reached inside his coat and unfolded one of Caleb's hand-drawn maps, the cellar's markings still smudged along the edges. Garen took it carefully, eyes narrowing as he followed the inked veins, mineral notes, and boundary lines. His brow tightened. This changes things. I knew Caleb suspected Vernon Slate of more than strong-arm tactics, Garen said, but I never had proof. Now you do, Thorne replied. The sheriff nodded once. Then you'll have my backing. But move careful. Slate owns half the men wearing badges in this territory. He lowered his voice. Push too hard, too fast, and you'll be buried before the truth ever breathes. Alara brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Then we don't rush. We build it quiet, one name at a time. Garen handed the map back. I'll start with Corwin Blake in Durango. Territorial clerk, honest, mostly. Before another word could settle, the saloon door creaked open. The air shifted. Everyone felt it. Vernon Slate stepped inside like the place already belonged to him. Tall, black suit untouched by dust, boots polished bright enough to reflect lantern light. His silver buckle flashed as he walked, and his smile arrived 2 steps ahead of his body. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, silent, watchful. Black Spur crew. Their eyes swept the room and stopped on Thorne. "Well now," Slate said smoothly. "Sheriff Garin, always good to see law and order enjoying a drink on my tab." Garin gave a slow nod but didn't reply. Slate's attention slid to Thorne. "Didn't expect to find you in public, Kess. Heard you'd gone scarce." Thorne remained seated. "Sometimes a man's busy survivin'. And sometimes," he added, "survivin's just another way to delay what's comin'." Slate's gaze shifted to Alara. "And this must be the runaway bride I've been hearing about." He extended his hand, slow, deliberate. "Vernon Slate, miss. Friend to every hard-working soul west of the Rio Grande." Alara didn't take it. "That sounds tiring," she said. "Being everyone's friend." Slate chuckled softly. "Sharp tongue. You'll need that out here." "I've got a spine, too," she replied. "We'll see which one you test first." The room went still. Thorne stood, stepping between them without a word. Slate's smile tightened, just a fraction. "Well now," he said, brushing imaginary dust from his lapel. "You two make quite the picture." His eyes cut back to Alara. "Careful, Miss Whitcomb. The last woman who got close to Thorne Kess ended up as ash and wind." Cold slid through her veins, but she didn't flinch. "Funny," she said. "The last man who tried to own me got left at the altar." Something sharp flickered behind Slate's eyes. "I like you," he said softly. "Just don't mistake liking for mercy." He tipped his hat and turned, boots echoing as he walked out. Outside the general store, Rylan Mercer lit a cigar and let the smoke roll slow from his lungs. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "Girl's got teeth." Thorne didn't answer. He leaned against the post, eyes tracking the dust trail Slate's boots left behind. Sheriff Garin stepped out moments later, unsettled. He's rattled. That smile only shows up when he's planning to bite harder. "Let him," Thorne said. "I've got teeth too." But Alara wasn't watching the street. She was studying the map again. "There's a ridge here," she murmured. "This section wasn't burned in the fire, was it?" Thorne leaned closer. "No, that's the land Caleb refused to sell." She tapped the corner. "Then this is where he'd hide the rest, the real documents." Garin narrowed his eyes. "You think there's more?" "I don't think," Alara said quietly. "I know." Both men turned toward her. "My father once had a diagram like this in his study," she said. "And one night, he burned it." Her voice tightened. "I remember the ashes." Thorne stared at her, stunned. She folded the map and slipped it back into his coat. "We're not chasing ghosts anymore," she said. "We're chasing the truth. We're hunting the one thing Vernon Slate fears more than guns." That night, back at the ranch, Alara Whitcomb sat near the hearth with Caleb Kess's journal resting on her knees. Firelight flickered across the careful, disciplined handwriting as she turned the pages slowly, reading not just words, but a man's conscience. A ribbon marked one entry. The ink had faded, yet the message remained clear. "If I die, it will be because truth weighs heavier than lies, and I would shoulder that weight again, even knowing the cost." Her chest tightened. Thorne Kess stepped in from the stable, boots dusted red, the scent of cedar and evening clinging to him. "I saw the way you looked at him today," he said quietly. "Slate. I wasn't afraid." "I didn't say you were," Thorn replied. But you should be. She closed the journal gently. A man who smiles like that has already chosen what he plans to take. Thorn sat across from her, elbows on his knees. He took my brother. He took Isha. And maybe their boy. He lifted his gaze, sharp but worn thin. But he hasn't taken this ranch. Not yet. He studied her. You still want to stay? Alara didn't hesitate. I came here to find out who I am. Turns out, I'm not someone who backs down. Something in Thorn's expression softened, only slightly. Good, he said. Because at first light, we ride for the ridge. If Caleb hid anything, that's where it'll be. Her fingers brushed the edge of the journal. We'll find it. Thorn moved to the doorway and looked out across the land. The storm had passed. The sky lay open, stars scattered like spilled salt. Yet even in the quiet, they both knew Vernon's slate was already moving. The war had finally begun. Beyond the fence line, beneath starlight and secrets, a shape shifted. A figure watched the house, then turned away. A boy, no older than 10, dark hair like coal, a small watch tucked into his pocket, and eyes that carried the blood of the Kess line. Tomorrow, he would step fully into the story, and nothing would ever be the same. Dawn broke just as Thorn finished saddling the horses. The air cut sharp, heavy with sage and dust. Morning tried to be beautiful, but the weight of what lay ahead dulled it. Alara tightened her gloves, fingers still stiff from the cold night. Thorn glanced at her. You sure you're ready for this? She mounted in one smooth motion. I didn't cross a desert to flinch at sunrise. They rode in silence as the trail narrowed and climbed. The ridge Caleb Kess had once defended with his life rose ahead. Jagged, scarred, half swallowed by time. Stone teeth jutted from the earth. Stubborn brush clung to red soil like memory refusing to fade. At the summit, they dismounted and tied the horses. Thorn led her toward a flat shelf of rock overlooking the canyon. He scanned the edge, then dropped to one knee beside a narrow crevice. This is it, he murmured. Alara crouched beside him. A weathered symbol had been carved into the stone. A sun cradled by a crescent moon. What is it? She asked. Red mesa marking, Thorn said. Isha's symbol. It means buried truth. They used it when something had to be remembered, not discovered. Together they cleared loose stone until Thorn's fingers struck metal. He dug deeper, revealing a small iron box, rust gnawing at its seams. With effort, he pried it open. Inside lay bundled letters, sealed documents, a folded land deed, and a photograph. Caleb, Isha, and a small boy with solemn eyes. Nico, Thorn whispered. Alara lifted the deed into the light. This proves everything. Caleb bought the land fair and square, found copper, refused to sell. Slate's name isn't anywhere, she added. No loopholes. Thorn picked up one of the letters. It was addressed to Sheriff Garin Slate. Never delivered. If something happens to me, it read, know that Vernon Slate isn't just breaking land. He's rewriting who belongs here, who gets to matter. Don't let him. Thorn's jaw locked. We've got him. For real this time? Alara said. She nodded. Then her attention shifted down the ridge. Movement. A flicker through brush. A figure stepped into view below, small, cautious, uncertain. A boy. Thorn straightened, heart hammering. Bare feet, torn collar, dark eyes wide. Alara's breath caught. That's him. Thorn's voice broke. That's Nico. They didn't move, afraid a single step might shatter the moment. The boy took one step forward, then ran. Wait! Thorn shouted, already moving. Alara followed, boots skidding as they plunged down the slope, branches snapping, gravel sliding, the canyon echoing with the sound of something lost, trying desperately not to be found. The boy vanished into the trees below. They split without a word. Thorn Kess cut left. Alara Whitcomb pushed through a thicket and caught sight of the child again, ducking behind a boulder, watching with wide, uncertain eyes. She stopped where she was. "I'm not here to hurt you," she called softly. No answer. She lowered herself to one knee, palms open. "My name's Alara." Silence held. "I knew your father," she added. "Caleb." The boy hesitated, then stepped into view. Cautious, curious. "You talk like him," he said. "The man who used to come to the spring. He called me son, but never stayed long. Said it wasn't safe." A voice came gently from behind her. "Nico?" The boy turned. For a moment longer than breath, the world stopped. "Are you Thorn?" he asked. Thorn nodded, unable to speak. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver watch. "I have yours." Thorn took it with shaking hands. Same face, same weight. The melody chimed when he opened it. "He gave it to me when I turned 7, Nico whispered. "Said it would help me stay brave." Thorn dropped to his knees and pulled the boy into his arms. Rough, desperate, like a man afraid the world might steal him again. Alara turned away, blinking hard. When Thorn finally released him, his voice was thick. "Where's your mother?" The boy's gaze fell. Gone. A year now. Fever took her. Thorn swallowed. "Where have you been living?" "Merelda found me," Nico said. "Kept me safe. She told me not to trust men with black leather boots and gold cuffs." Thorn let out a faint laugh. "That sounds like her." He looked at Alara. "We take him back. Today." She nodded. "Vernon Slate's going to hear about this soon enough." Thorn took the boy's hand. "You ride with me." They reached the ranch by sundown. Merelda Knox waited on the porch, arms crossed, shotgun resting beside her chair. "Well," she said, "look who finally decided to come home." Nico broke into a grin and ran to her. She wrapped him tight, whispering something into his hair. Alara leaned against the post. "You knew?" Merelda nodded. "Aisha didn't die in that fire. Slate made sure the world believed she did. But she escaped with the boy. Hid for years." Her eyes darkened. "I helped when I could. Then one day she never came back. I found him 2 weeks later, half-starved, alone." Alara's chest tightened. "You kept him hidden all this time." "Safe," Merelda corrected. "Not hidden." She looked up. "You hide what you're ashamed of. You protect what you believe in." Thorn stepped forward with the iron box tucked under his arm. "We're ready." Merelda studied him. "Then you'd better be smarter than Slate. He doesn't lose quiet. He's too used to winning." Alara moved beside Thorn. "Let him try." Her eyes hardened. "He's not the only one who knows how to fight dirty." Thorn met her gaze. "At dawn, we ride for Durango. Get this filed with Corwin Blake. Make it official." Alara glanced toward the horizon. "He'll try to stop us." Thorn's jaw set. "Then we ride with fire at our backs." Nico tugged his sleeve. "Will there be guns?" Thorn gave a faint smile. "Maybe." "Good," Nico said proudly. "I'm a good shot, with Slate." Alara laughed, and for the first time in days, it didn't feel borrowed from silence. That night, the ranch lay quiet. Thorn sat alone on the porch, the watch ticking softly in his palm. Inside, Alara read Caleb's letters aloud to Nico. her voice calm, steady. The boy drifted to sleep on the rug, curled like a fox pup. Thorn watched through the window. A family he thought burned to ash was slowly rising again. But as the wind shifted and coyotes cried beyond the fence, he whispered into the dark. He doesn't know we have the boy. Not yet. But when he does, everything will burn. Across the hills, a rider spurred hard through the night, driven by gold, fear, and a single message carried like a curse. The Kess boy is alive. By morning, blood would follow. Dawn cracked over Navajo Edge, thick with tension. The sky felt wrong, too still. The wind held its breath. Even the horses stamped uneasy. Thorn cinched his gelding tighter than usual, checked his rifle twice, and kept one eye on the road leading into town. Inside the house, Alara helped Nico pack a small satchel. She handed him Caleb's old journal, its corners worn soft by years. "Hold on to this," she said gently, kissing the top of his head. "It's part of who you are. It was your father's," Alara said softly. "It carries things that outlast bullets." Nico nodded, clutching the journal tight against his chest. "If anything happens, nothing's going to happen," she added too fast, her voice betraying her. "We're riding with the truth on our side." The boy lifted his eyes, studying her. "Then why are you scared?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled him close, arms wrapped tight, and whispered against his hair, "Because I'm not foolish. No." By the time they reached the outskirts of Durango, the heat had already risen off the dirt roads, and eyes followed them from every porch and doorway. Thorn Kess, Alara Whitcomb, Nico, and Sheriff Garen Slate rode in together. Rylan Mercer flanked them, along with 2 ranch hands Thorn trusted with his life. They formed no parade, but every man rode with purpose. They passed the saloon, ignored the general store. Their horses carried them straight to the territorial clerk's office. The building sagged like something forgotten by time, stone base cracked, windows warped, an old plaque dulled by years of dust. Inside, a balding man in suspenders looked up from a mountain of ledgers. "Can I help you?" he asked. Sheriff Garen Slate stepped forward. "Name Slate, Sheriff of Navajo Edge. We're here to file a land dispute and submit evidence of fraud involving Vernon Slate." The clerk blinked. "You don't say." Thorn set the iron box on the desk with a heavy thud. Inside lay deeds, letters, maps. Every trail Caleb Kess had left behind. "Read them," Alara said. "Every page." The clerk removed his spectacles, wiped them carefully, and began turning the documents. It didn't take long. His brow tightened, then his eyes widened. "These are original, verified, legal." He swallowed. "This letter's addressed to me." Thorn lifted his chin. "Then I suggest you read it." The clerk did. By the final line, his hands shook. "This is enough to open a full investigation," he said quietly. "Land fraud, bank manipulation, judicial interference." He looked up slowly. "This isn't one crime. It's a network." "Now you understand," Alara said. "Now act." The man stood. "I'll file this within the hour. Once it's registered, Vernon Slate loses mineral rights immediately. And if the Santa Fe judges read what's here, he'll lose more than land." That was when the front door exploded inward. Wood splintered. 2 armed men stormed inside, rifles raised. Behind them walked Vernon Slate. He entered slowly, brushing dust from his gloves as if unbothered. "Well," he drawled, "ain't this a family gathering?" Thorn had his gun up instantly, but one of the black spur crew seized Nico, pressing cold steel to the boy's temple. Slate raised a finger. "Easy now. Let's not make this tragic." Thorn froze. So did Alara. You truly thought, Slate continued smoothly, you could crawl out of your holes, wave a few burned papers, and topple an empire? Alara stepped forward, her voice steady as stone. Those papers will end you. Slate laughed softly. Darling, I own the men who read papers. You used to, Thorn growled. Not anymore. Slate's smile thinned. I should have wiped your bloodline out years ago. You tried, Thorn said. Kess men don't burn easy. Slate's gaze slid to the child. Maybe the boy does. Before anyone could move, a sharp whistle sliced the air outside. Then another. Slate hesitated. Gunfire erupted. Shouts, hooves, chaos. Thorn lunged, smashing the gun aside and yanking Nico free. Sheriff Garen Slate fired once, catching one attacker in the shoulder. Alara tackled the clerk to the floor as bullets shattered the window. The rear door burst open. Rylan Mercer charged in with 3 Red Mesa riders, weapons raised. When the smoke cleared, Vernon Slate was gone. Move, Thorn shouted. We ride now. They tore through Durango's back alleys, dust and screams chasing their heels. Rylan led them hard toward the canyon. Alara leaned low in the saddle, braids snapping behind her. Nico clung to her waist, heart hammering. They didn't stop until an abandoned way station rose from the scrub. Everyone dismounted gasping, coated in dust and sweat. Thorn paced, fists clenched. He knew we were coming. Alara sank onto a broken crate, breathing hard. Someone warned him. Sheriff Garen Slate pulled a spent round from his belt. Military issue? Ryland spat. He's buying soldiers now. Then lawyers won't finish this, Thorn said darkly. Steele will. Alara met his eyes. He nearly killed Nico. Her voice hardened. He doesn't care about law or land. He wants to erase the past so no one can challenge the present. Thorn nodded slowly, jaw tight. Then we stopped defending, and somewhere behind the hills, the war tightened its grip. Thorn turned toward the group, his voice steady but hard. We head back first. We find every soul he's crushed. We gather their words, their sworn statements, their names. We build something he can't burn down. Alara rose to her feet. You want a movement? She said quietly. I want a fire he can't smother. Nico stepped forward. His voice was small, but it didn't shake. He took my father. He took my home. I won't let him take my name. Thorn dropped to one knee in front of him. He won't, he said. Not again. The boy hesitated, then lifted his chin. Then teach me how to shoot. Thorn's eyes burned, but he nodded. I will. That night, beneath a sky stitched with stars, Alara sat watching the flames twist and rise. Thorn settled beside her, silent as the desert itself. She finally spoke. The law won't save us. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, the law bends, but truth cuts. Far beyond their campfire glow, atop a rocky cliff, Vernon Slate stood watching the light flicker in the dark. He turned to the scout beside him. They're gathering, he said calmly, like wolves. The scout swallowed. Should we strike now? Slate smiled thinly. No, let them howl. When I move, I don't want them angry. I want them broken. And so the war truly began, not with gunfire, but with voices, with wounds still bleeding, with stories long buried, finally clawing their way into daylight. The church bell in Navajo Edge hadn't rung in years. It hung crooked and rusted, a relic forgotten by time. But that morning, as dust lifted and wind whispered reckoning, it rang again. 3 heavy tolls that rolled across the valley. Sheriff Garen Slate's signal. Thorne stood at the bluff's edge, watching riders appear from every direction. Dust trails rose like spirits returning home. They came on mules, on stallions, in wagons, and on foot. Ranchers, traders, shepherds, retired soldiers, and a handful of women whose eyes were harder than the sun-baked stone beneath them. Not an army, but close enough. They came, Alara whispered. Thorne didn't look away. Slate burned too many bridges. Now he gets to watch what grows from the ashes. By midday, the old mission barn behind the church had become command ground. Maps covered tables. Documents lined the walls. Sheriff Garen Slate stood before the crowd, like a man preaching judgment. "This isn't just about land," he said. "It's about power. It's about history. And it's about fixing what we let rot too long." Murmurs rolled through the room. Thorne stepped forward, lifting the pocket watch so its soft ticking carried. "My family was almost erased," he said. "But we're still breathing. And now we've got proof, contracts, bribes, forged rulings, enough to split Vernon Slate's empire straight down the center." He turned to Alara. She stepped forward, holding a thick ledger. "My father was a judge," she began. "Judge Malcolm Whitcomb. He ruled in Slate's favor more than once. I used to believe that meant the law was on Slate's side." She opened the book. I was wrong. It was fear. She lifted the pages, names written in her father's careful script. Families displaced, ranches seized, men jailed without warrant. Each line cut like an open wound. "And this," Alara said, voice tight, "is how we begin healing." The crowd shifted. Whispers turned to voices. Sheriff Garen Slate nodded to his deputy, who began handing out copies of the documents. Then a sharp voice sliced through the room. "So what?" a man barked. "We march into court and pray they don't throw us out like yesterday's bread." All eyes turned to Jonas Reeve, an aging rancher with a limp earned in a mine collapse no one ever investigated. Thorne faced him calmly. "This time, we go to Santa Fe. We bring affidavits, deeds, testimony, and we put it before federal eyes. This isn't only about Vernon Slate anymore. It's about setting a line that can't be crossed again." Jonas scoffed. "And if we lose?" Thorne met his gaze without blinking. "Then we lose out loud. Loud enough the world hears us anyway." Silence followed. Then one person clapped, then another. Soon the barn shook, not with polite approval, but with the raw thunder of people who'd lived too long beneath another man's boot. Sheriff Garen Slate raised his voice above the roar. "We ride for Santa Fe at dawn. 2 wagons, armed escort." And for the first time in years, the desert didn't feel empty. It felt awake. "The rest stay behind," Thorne said, scanning the faces around him. "Keep eyes on Vernon Slate. If he moves in any direction." He paused. "We answer." That night, the fire circle near the mission burned strong against the dark. Nico sat between Alara and Merelda, dragging a stick through the dirt, shaping lines with quiet focus. "It's a wolf," he said, "but it ain't hunting." Alara leaned closer. "What's it doing then?" "It's watching," the boy replied. "Watching for what?" Nico hesitated. "Other wolves. The kind that dress like sheep." Alara lifted her gaze to Merelda. The older woman's mouth tightened. "The boy's not wrong." Thorne approached, carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle. He knelt beside Nico and slowly peeled it open. Inside lay a short, repeating rifle, worn but cared for, small enough for young hands. Nico's breath caught. For me? Thorn nodded. It was mine when I was your age. My father made me carve my name into the stock. He turned it gently. Go on. Find it. Nico traced the wood until his fingers stopped. My Blackthorn, I want to be like you, the boy whispered. Thorn swallowed hard. Don't. Be better. Miles away, beneath lamplight and polished glass, Vernon Slate poured whiskey into a crystal tumbler. He stared at the burned scrap of paper his scout had delivered, news of the gathering. His fingers crushed it slowly. Hollis Dreck stepped inside. They're riding for the capital. Documents, witnesses. That sheriff's holding firm. Slate nodded once. Good. Let them stack the kindling. Drex frowned. Sir, when I strike, Slate said calmly, I want the whole territory glowing. He turned toward the window, smoke faint on the southern horizon. And I want to know exactly where to aim. Back at the mission, Alara sat alone inside the chapel. Candles flickered along the altar. The stained glass window above was cracked, one pane missing entirely, another dulled by years of dust. The Virgin's face had faded with time, almost erased, much like the truth in this town. Thorn entered quietly. You all right? He asked. No, she said honestly. But I'm ready. He sat beside her on the pew. I read your father's letters, he said after a moment. He wasn't cruel. Just blind, Alara replied. Blind men still lead people off cliffs. Thorn reached into his coat and unfolded a worn letter. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Caleb Kess. She read silently. Judge Malcolm Whitcomb, if you're reading this, then maybe you finally see the damage you've helped cause. I never hated you, but I feared the world you were building for your daughter. Her hands trembled. He knew who you were, Thorn said softly. Before you did. Alara stared ahead, eyes wet. Then something steadied inside her. Then maybe, she whispered, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. The bell rang again at sunrise, not for prayer, for war. And those who answered no longer came with hymnals and regret. They came with names, with voices, with rifles, and with something far more dangerous. A reason. Morning light sliced through the mist as wagons rolled south from Navajo Edge toward Santa Fe. Thorn rode point on his black gelding, jaw tight, eyes sharp. Beside him, Alara held her rein steady, though her chest burned with tension. Nico rode between them, shoulders squared, clutching Caleb's journal like armor. Behind them followed two covered wagons, one stacked with documents, the other with food, water, and bundled testimonies. Rylan Mercer rode flank with two Red Mesa riders, silent and watchful. Sheriff Garen Slate and his deputy brought up the rear. They weren't riding only for proof anymore. They were riding for justice. And Vernon Slate knew it. 20 miles south, the caravan passed the blackened remains of a supply station. The roof had collapsed. Smoke still clung to the stone. Thorn dismounted, circling the ruin. Slate's signature, he muttered. Alara knelt beside the ashes. Controlled burn. He wanted us to see it. Rylan sniffed the air. Kerosene. No bodies, Sheriff Slate said quietly. Just a message. Thorn straightened. Then let's send one back. He carved into a scorched plank with his knife and drove it upright beside the trail. We're still coming. They camped at dusk in a canyon bend where stone walls swallowed sound. The fire burned low. Nico studied the maps beside Alara. This pass here, she said, pointing. We cut east tomorrow. Fewer eyes. The boy nodded. And if Slate sends men ahead? Thorne placed a small pocket pistol into his hand, single shot, clean and oiled. Then you fire once, he said, and run like hell. Nico closed his fingers around it solemnly. He didn't smile, but he didn't tremble either. I won't miss. Nearby, Sheriff Garen Slate counted cartridges by firelight, while Rylan Mercer worked a whetstone along the edge of a long blade. They all felt it. They were being followed. They just didn't know when the wolves would decide to close their jaws. It came just past midnight. The first shot split the darkness like thunder tearing open the sky. Thorne was on his feet instantly, rifle already in his hands. Alara dragged Nico into the wagon and shoved a crate in front of him. Stay down, she whispered sharply. Don't make a sound. Gunfire ripped through the canyon in violent flashes. Shadows moved along the ridge above. Black spur crew, at least half a dozen, firing downward from higher ground. Ambush, Rylan shouted. They've got elevation. Sheriff Slate dove behind a boulder. They knew our route. Someone talked, Thorne roared. The wagons fired back. Bullets tore through canvas. One wheel exploded into splinters. Horses screamed and bolted into the night. Thorne fired 3 hard shots toward the ridge. One body toppled forward and rolled into the firelight. Hollis Drex, Slate's right hand. Another gunshot cracked, closer this time. Thorne turned just in time to see a masked man leap down behind Alara. Get down, he shouted. Too late. The man seized her, pistol jammed against her ribs. Drop it, the attacker snarled. Thorne froze. Alara didn't. She drove her elbow back with everything she had, breaking his grip. As she twisted free, Sheriff Slate fired once, clean through the man's shoulder. He collapsed screaming into the dirt. Thorne rushed to her side. You hurt? Alara shook her head, breath shaking. Close, she said. Too close. Behind them, Nico crawled halfway from the wagon. Stay put, Thorne barked, but the boy pointed upward. There's another one. Thorne spun. A faint glint flashed on the ridge. Rifle barrel lined up on the second wagon. No, Thorne shouted, already running. The shot fired. The bullet tore through the wagon wall, straight through the sack of documents. Paper burst into the air like frightened birds. Thorne dove inside, throwing himself over the bundle as flames caught the edges. By the time Sheriff Slate and Rylan cleared the ridge, the last attacker lay dead, but half the evidence was already ash. Silence crept back in, heavy and cruel. They sat around the dying fire, blood drying on sleeves, the canyon walls echoing only the pop of embers. Thorne stared at the ruined sack. What remained was barely a quarter. Some affidavits, the land deed, Caleb Kess's letters. The rest was gone. Alara approached slowly. How bad? Bad enough, Thorne muttered. This was meant to be undeniable. Sheriff Slate wiped blood from his temple. They weren't trying to kill us. They were trying to weaken us, Rylan said grimly. Rattle our bones. Make us doubt. Thorne slammed his fist against the wagon frame. And it worked. No, Alara said firmly. She held up Caleb's journal. This survived. The deed survived. And Nico survived. She met Thorne's eyes. So did we. We still ride to Santa Fe. We still stand in that courthouse and tell what happened. Thorne studied her. She didn't blink. Let them burn our paper, she said quietly. We'll speak louder. By dawn, the caravan was smaller. Fewer horses, less food, no sleep at all. But their steps felt heavier, rooted. At a river bend, Thorne reined in and turned to Nico. You saw what they did, he said. You still want this? The boy straightened. They killed my parents. They tried to erase me. But I'm still here. Thorne nodded once, then faced the group. Next stop, Santa Fe. We walk in with what we've got, and we make it count. Rylan asked, even if the judge throws it out? Thorne's jaw hardened. Then we tell the people. We print it. We write every town, every outpost. And we read the damn truth out loud if we have to. Alara smiled, dry, fierce. Vernon Slate made one mistake. Sheriff Slate asked quietly, "What's that?" "He burned our paper," she said. "But he forgot something." Fire spreads. They rode on, slower now, wounded, exhausted, but unstoppable. Smoke still curled behind them from the canyon. Ahead waited something heavier. Justice or vengeance. Maybe both. As the sun crested the horizon, the gates of Santa Fe rose before them, stone walls glowing gold in the morning light. They had ridden for 3 days through smoke, dried blood, and long stretches of silence. When the city finally rose ahead of them, it looked like either salvation or the gallows. Thorne Kess shifted in the saddle, eyes sweeping the stone buildings beyond the gates. No more turns after this. Alara Whitcomb rode beside him, reins tight in her hands. No more running either. In the wagon behind them, Rylan Mercer sat upright with Caleb Kess's journal resting in his lap. Beside it lay the last surviving affidavits, names and testimonies written in fragile ink, truth balanced on paper thin as skin. At the city gates, 2 armed guards stepped forward. "State your purpose," one demanded. Sheriff Garen Slate dismounted and drew a sealed document from his coat. "By writ of urgent claim," he said evenly. "We're here to file evidence in an active land fraud and corruption case." The guard studied the group, wary, then waved them through. As they passed under the archway, Thorne leaned toward Alara. "We just walked into the lion's mouth." She nodded once. "Good. Let's pull its damn teeth." The courthouse loomed like a monument to contradiction. Tall columns, peeling paint, justice carved in stone above doors no one trusted anymore. Inside, the air smelled of parchment, sweat, and old decisions. Clerks hurried past beneath the high ceilings while the group waited on a wooden bench. Nico's fingers tapped nervously against the seat beside Alara. "You all right?" she asked softly. He swallowed. "I'm scared." She leaned closer. "You should be. That means you're sane. But being scared doesn't mean staying silent." He hesitated. "What if no one believes us?" Alara looked toward the closed chamber doors. "Then we speak until they have no choice but to listen." When their names were called, they entered the hearing room. Judge Alden Frost sat behind the bench, silver-bearded, eyes sharp as cut stone. His reputation preceded him. Fair when it mattered, ruthless when it didn't. His clerk stood nearby, docket in hand. Thorne stepped forward and laid the remaining documents on the table. Land deed, Caleb's letters, sworn affidavits. Alara followed, placing her father's private ledger beside them. Last came Caleb's weathered notebook. Judge Frost adjusted his spectacles. "You are accusing Vernon Slate," he said slowly. "A man with influence across commerce, banking, and territorial enforcement, of bribery, land seizure, and attempted murder." His gaze lifted. "This is not a campfire story, Mr. Kess. This is a court." Thorne met his eyes. "Then let the truth be spoken like scripture." The judge's brow lifted. "Proceed." Sheriff Garen Slate began, laying out the timeline. Forced sales, raids disguised as accidents, threats delivered in quiet rooms, Then Alara stepped forward. She read aloud from the ledger her father had once hidden. "He knew," she said. "He knew he was enforcing corruption. And in the end, it broke him." But this ledger records his confession. A ripple moved through the chamber. Names were spoken aloud. Some men shifted on the benches. One stood and stormed out. Another remained seated, face drained of color. Then Nico walked forward. He stood alone in the center of the room, small but unflinching. He held up a photograph. Caleb, Aisha, and a baby, cradled between them. "My name is Nico," he said clearly. "My parents were killed because someone wanted their land. I've been hiding ever since." He placed the photograph on the judge's bench. "But I'm done hiding. And I want my name back." For a long moment, no one breathed. Then Judge Alden Frost spoke, voice low but carrying. "Step forward, all of you." They obeyed. "You've presented compelling testimony," he said. "Though much was lost in the attack, what remains paints a deeply troubling picture. I am issuing an immediate injunction freezing all activity on the disputed land. And I am requesting a full federal inquiry." Thorne released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. But the judge wasn't finished. "You've kicked a nest of hornets," Frost warned. "Expect to be stung." The city ignited with news. By dusk, Vernon Slate's name was no longer spoken in whispers, but in anger. Witnesses emerged. A retired banker confessed to falsified ledgers. A widow from Rio Blanco testified that Slate's men burned her husband's ranch when he refused to sell. A clerk from Durango sent written confirmation of bribery routed through shell accounts. But with the light came shadow. Vernon Slate vanished. His ranch stood empty. His men scattered. Some fled, others regrouped in the hills, bitter and armed. Thorne, Alara, and Nico were placed under guard at the estate of one of Sheriff Slate's relatives on the city's edge. At night, they took turns watching the windows. At dawn, Alara stood on the porch when Sheriff Slate rode in with a telegram clutched in his hand. She read it once, then again. Her fingers trembled. "It's from Vernon Slate," she said quietly. And the war, it seemed, wasn't finished speaking yet. "He wants a meeting," Sheriff Garen Slate said quietly. "No weapons. Tomorrow at first light." Thorne Kess's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "Black Mesa." Nico stepped forward before anyone else could speak. "That's where my mother died." The words settled over them like drifting smoke. "He's baiting us," Ryland Mercer muttered. "Maybe," Thorne replied. "But if we refuse, he'll spin it his way. Call us cowards. Say we're hiding behind judges and paper." Alara folded the telegram carefully. "Then we go. And we make sure the sun rises on the truth." That night the fire burned low and cautious. Nico sat beside Thorne, staring into the coals. "You think he'll kill us?" Thorne didn't lie. "He might try, but we've got the law now, the judge, the filings." He paused, jaw tightening. "Sometimes the law moves slow," he said. "Sometimes it needs help standing upright." Nico's voice came soft but steady. "Then I'll stand too." Thorne looked at the boy, his blood, his past, and nodded once. "Then we stand together." Far across the desert, atop the flat crown of Black Mesa, Vernon Slate stood beneath the night wind. Beside him waited Hollis Drex and two loyal men. Slate stared into the dark, like it owed him repayment. "They'll come," Drex said. Slate smiled thinly. "Of course they will." He turned toward the horizon. That's the thing about wildfire. If you light it right, you don't have to stay and watch. You just walk away. Behind him, a wagon sat beneath a black tarp. Inside it rested something more dangerous than bullets. It carried the past, compressed, twisted, and ready to explode. Dawn crept over Black Mesa like a blade drawn slow. The sky turned the color of old steel. Thorne tightened his gloves, every movement measured. No speeches, no bravado, only leather creaking, saddles shifting, and the shared understanding that this wasn't about pride anymore. This was judgment. The trail toward the mesa twisted upward through rock and scrub, narrow enough for only 2 riders abreast. Rylan rode point. Sheriff Garen Slate followed. Ilara and Thorne flanked the wagon. Nico hidden beneath a wool tarp beside Caleb Kess's journal and what little evidence remained. At the ridge they dismounted. Wind hissed across stone. Thorne turned to Ilara. Last chance to turn back. She stared at the flat summit ahead. That passed days ago. He nodded once. Then he knelt beside Nico. Stay inside, no matter what you hear. The boy lifted his chin. I'm not scared. Thorne gave a faint smile. Then you're not thinking hard enough. They climbed. Vernon Slate waited alone at the center of the mesa. His coat snapped in the wind, silver hair tied back, black gloves smooth and spotless. Behind him lingered Hollis Drex and 2 hired guns near the canvas-covered wagon. As Thorne, Ilara, and Sheriff Slate approached, Vernon spread his arms wide. Well now, he drawled, the prodigal son and his traveling tribunal. Thorne's boots crunched on gravel. Drop the performance. You asked for this meeting. We're here. Of course you are, Vernon said lightly. You always did have a taste for impossible odds and suicide plays. Ilara stepped forward. You lost, Vernon. The judge froze your claims. Witnesses are lining up across the territory. His smile never flickered. That judge? Vernon scoffed. He'll have a letter from my lawyers before noon. And you think anyone outside that courtroom gives a damn about old notebooks and orphaned children? Sheriff Garen Slate moved closer, hand near his holster. You're slipping, he said. People aren't afraid of you anymore. Vernon's voice lowered. They don't need to fear me. They only need to fear what happens without me. He nodded once. Hollis Drex pulled the tarp from the wagon. Inside sat crates of dynamite, wired, stacked, waiting. Thorne's breath tightened. You're bluffing. Vernon laughed, this time genuine. You think I built all this with patience? If I fall, I take half this mesa with me. You, the boy, the evidence. And a damn sunrise. Ilara's gaze flicked to the explosives. There's no honor in this. No legacy. Vernon turned toward her, eyes cold. Legacy? You're clinging to notebooks and ghosts. I built railroads. I bent rivers. And when history writes this land, they'll carve my name in black ink. Thorne stepped closer, slow, deliberate. You talk too much, he said quietly, for a man who's already lost. Vernon Slate's eyes tightened. You really believe truth wins just by showing up? Thorne Kess answered without raising his voice. It cuts sharper that way. No, but it survives, even after men like you don't. The moment shattered. One of the Black Spur crew lifted his rifle. But Rylan Mercer dropped him before the barrel cleared shoulder height. Gunfire split the mesa. Sheriff Garen Slate slammed into the second gunman, driving him hard into the stone as Hollis Drex lunged for the wagon. Thorne sprinted, boots pounding, and vaulted onto the cart. Fists flew. Drex clawed toward the detonator wired into the crate. Thorne smashed an elbow into his jaw. They grappled, boots skidding across the warped planks. Drex seized Thorne's collar and snarled, "You're already dead." Thorne answered with a headbutt. Bone cracked. He tore free drew his knife, and slashed once, clean and precise. The detonation cord snapped. Drex cursed and swung wildly, but Thorn tackled him, driving his skull against the iron rim of the wheel until the fight drained from his body. The threat was done. Vernon Slate stood frozen. Alara Whitcomb had her pistol leveled at his chest, arm steady as stone. "Blink," she said quietly, "and I pull the trigger." Slate sneered. "You don't have it in you." She stepped closer. "You burned my family's name. You tried to erase a child." Her voice didn't rise. "And now you want to decide how this ends?" "No. You don't get that choice." Nico climbed down from the wagon. Caleb Kess's journal clutched tight in both hands. He walked toward Vernon Slate without fear. "This is what my father left behind," he said. "Not bullets, not fire. Words." Slate's jaw twitched. Nico stopped 2 paces away and opened the journal. "The land only belongs to you if you can look it in the eye and see something worth dying for." That's what he wrote. That's what you never understood. Silence fell. Then came the thunder of hooves. Dozens. From the northern slope, riders crested the mesa. Townsfolk, farmers, witnesses from Santa Fe, and Red Mesa elders riding shoulder to shoulder. They had come to see how truth finished its work. Thorn exhaled slowly and looked at Vernon Slate. "You hear that? That's your legacy turning into testimony." Slate turned in place, surrounded, outnumbered, outlived. His hands opened at his sides. The wind caught his coat. For the first time, he looked small. The crowd parted as Judge Alden Frost rode forward, flanked by 2 High Plains marshals. He dismounted and gave Thorn a firm nod. "You've done enough. We'll take it from here." The marshals cuffed Vernon Slate. He didn't resist. He only stared at the dirt where his empire collapsed. As they led him past Nico, he muttered, voice frayed, "You think you've won, boy. People forget. The world always forgets." Nico didn't flinch. "No," he said. "We remember louder." That evening, Black Mesa stood empty. The dynamite was dismantled. The wagon burned. Ash scattered into the rocks as the wind carried the last breath of Vernon Slate's power into the canyons. Thorn, Alara, and Nico stood together overlooking the land. "Your father would be proud," Alara whispered. Nico didn't answer. He stared toward the horizon, jaw set tight. Thorn rested a hand on his shoulder. "You all right?" Nico nodded once. "We stopped him. But it's not over." Thorn followed his gaze south, where faint smoke still curled against the sky. "No," he said quietly. "It's just beginning." The dust hadn't even settled on Black Mesa when retaliation came. 2 nights later, a ranch west of Navajo Edge erupted in flames. The barn went first, then the feed store. Part of the main house collapsed before dawn. The family barely escaped. No one claimed responsibility. No one needed to. The message was clear. Vernon Slate might be in chains, but his reach remained. Thorn stood at the edge of the smoldering ruins the next morning, ash clinging to his boots. Alara rode up beside him, jaw tight. "They waited until we thought we were safe," she said. Nico joined them, holding a burned horseshoe in his palm. "And they'll do it again." Thorn stared across the blackened field. "The truth's louder now," he said, "but so is the danger." In Santa Fe, Judge Alden Frost ordered Vernon Slate transferred to a secure holding cell in Albuquerque to await trial. But the road between the 2 cities stretched long and exposed. "We'll need an escort," Sheriff Garen Slate said, pacing the mission barn now turned war room. "Armed, trusted. We don't have enough deputies. Rylan Mercer warned. And we can't trust every badge in the territory. Thorne stood by the window, watching the sun bleed into the mountains, knowing the next fight wouldn't come with speeches or papers, only choices and consequences. Then we ride with him, Thorne Kess said. All of us. Nico looked up from the rough table where he'd been scratching routes onto a hand-drawn map with a charcoal stub. You think they'll try to take him back? Thorne met the boy's eyes. No. I think they'll try to kill him before he ever gets the chance to talk. They moved before first light. 2 wagons rolled out, one reinforced and barred for Vernon's slate, the other loaded with documents, provisions, and copies of the evidence. Alara Whitcomb rode in the second, Nico beside her. Caleb Kess's journal secured inside her satchel, every page duplicated and notarized. Judge Malcolm Whitcomb rode near the front with Sheriff Garen Slate and 2 High Plains marshals, forming the spine of the escort. Rylan Mercer and Thorne took rear guard, rifles ready, while scouts flanked the line from both ridges. It wasn't a convoy. It was a moving stronghold. But they weren't alone on the road. Halfway through the narrow pass between the cliffs of Red Hollow, a rock slide blocked the trail ahead. Natural? Garen asked, dismounting. Rylan crouched, brushing dust between his fingers. No. This was pushed. Thorne was already scanning the ridge lines. He saw movement. Then the air split. Gunfire erupted. The first marshal went down before he could clear leather. Chaos followed, horses screaming, men shouting, shots ricocheting off stone like war drums. Thorne dragged Alara behind the wagon as bullets sparked against iron fittings. Stay with the boy. Nico ducked low inside the wagon, clutching the journal to his chest. His face had gone pale, but his hand stayed steady. Alara checked her revolver. We can't hold both sides. Thorne's voice stayed calm, even as rocks shattered inches from his shoulder. Then we don't. He pointed toward a narrow trail climbing the ridge above the pass. Take Nico, take the journal, cut over the ridge and meet us on the far side. We draw the fire. She hesitated. He didn't blink. Go, now. Alara pulled Nico up the slope, weaving through boulders as the shots cracked behind them. She didn't look back, not yet. Thorne will be okay, right? Nico asked between breaths. He has to be, she said. The truth needs witnesses. But right now, we need to survive. At the crest of the ridge, she stopped and opened the journal. Her fingers found the final page Caleb Kess had written. He knew this would happen, she whispered. He said if the truth ever came out, it wouldn't end in court. It would end in blood. Nico stared down into the valley. Below them, the fight unfolded in bursts of smoke and flame. Back in the canyon, Thorne and Rylan returned fire from behind the second wagon. One attacker had reached the horses, cutting reins. Thorne lunged, slammed the man against the wheel, and tore the weapon from his grip. Who sent you? He barked. The man spat blood. Slate ain't the only one who owns this land. A rifle cracked near Garen's position. The attacker fell, but another charged down from the ridge. Rylan dropped him clean. Thorne turned toward the prisoner wagon and froze. Smoke. Inside, Vernon's slate had somehow struck a match. Straw bedding ignited fast, flames licking the wooden walls. Damn it. Thorne sprinted as fire climbed the side panels. Inside, Slate sat chained, coughing, grinning through the smoke. If I'm going down, he shouted, I'm doing it my way. Thorne ripped the door open, smoke clawing his lungs. No, he growled. Not this time. He grabbed a blanket, smothered the flames, then hauled Slate out into the dirt as the man thrashed and coughed. The fire scarred the wagon, but didn't spread. Rylan rushed over. You good? Thorne spat soot. I'm breathing. He's alive. Slate laughed weakly between gasps. Then you're dumber than I thought. Thorne looked down at him. No, he said quietly, just patient. Because your real sentence hasn't started yet. By dusk, they pushed through the ambush. 2 men dead, 3 wounded. But they were still moving. They regrouped at an abandoned telegraph station on the edge of Albuquerque. Inside, Alara handed the journal to Judge Malcolm Whitcomb. We kept it safe, she said, and the boy. The judge opened the book slowly, eyes darkening as he read. This, he murmured, changes everything. Ryland stood beside him, dust-covered, steady. Thorne entered moments later, blood on his shirt, grime on his face, but standing. He looked straight at Nico. You all right? Nico nodded. You. Thorne gave a tired grin. You know me. Black thorns bend. But they don't break. Outside, the desert wind howled as daylight faded, and somewhere far off, another fire was lit. Not from hatred, but from hope. Not to burn the truth away, but to light the road ahead. They were close now. Yet one final reckoning still waited in the shadows. Rain drifted down on the morning of the trial, not a storm, not a warning. Just a thin, silver fall that pressed the dust flat and quieted Santa Fe's streets. People gathered early outside the courthouse. Boots tapped softly on stone. Hats were held low in respectful hands. Voices stayed hushed. They hadn't come for a hanging. They hadn't come for spectacle. They came for justice. Inside, every bench was filled. Ranchers shoulder to shoulder with merchants. Former deputies sat stiff-backed. Red Mesa elders stood in traditional dress along the wall. Even men who once looked away now kept their eyes lowered. At the front table sat Thorne Kess, beside Alara Whitcomb and Nico. Sheriff Garen Slate stood behind them, hand resting near his revolver. Not from fear, but from memory. Across the aisle, Vernon Slate sat in irons. He no longer looked like the man who had ruled half the territory. His silver hair hung loose. His fine coat was gone. Only the cold fire in his eyes remained. All rise. Judge Alden Frost entered. The room obeyed. When they were seated again, his voice came steady, hard as cut stone. This court is convened under the authority of the New Mexico Territory and the United States government. We are here to determine whether Vernon Slate knowingly committed acts of fraud, coercion, and murder in pursuit of unlawful control over Red Mesa lands and surrounding claims. He glanced down at the towering stack of documents. Proceed. Witnesses stepped forward one by one. A widow whose ranch burned after refusing to sell. A former lawman who admitted orders came from above. A trader whose store fire had once been labeled accidental. Each voice added another stitch to the long-torn fabric of truth. Then Alara Whitcomb approached the stand. She carried her father's ledger in both hands. My name is Alara Whitcomb, she said evenly. My father was Judge Malcolm Whitcomb. For years, he signed away justice like entries in a cattle book. He believed he was preserving order. What he was truly doing was helping men like Vernon Slate turn fear into currency. She opened the ledger and held it high. This book records more than names and dates. It records silence and the cost of it. Then Thorne Kess stood. He carried no papers, only memory. I watched my brother, Caleb Kess, die trying to keep his family safe. I buried him without a marker, because there wasn't land left to claim. Slate didn't just steal property. He stole time, generations, legacies. He tried to brand history like livestock. Thorne's voice never wavered. And now, he said, We branded back. Finally, Nico stepped forward. He held Caleb's journal close to his chest like something sacred. "I was only a baby when my parents were killed," he said quietly. "But they left me something stronger than land. They left me the truth. I carried it my whole life, even before I understood what it meant." He looked straight at Vernon Slate. "I understand now." By mid-afternoon, Judge Frost returned to the bench. He reviewed every page again, slow, deliberate, exacting. The courtroom didn't breathe. Then he spoke. "Vernon Slate, this court finds you guilty on all counts." No cheers rose. No applause followed. Only a silence so heavy it felt holy. Vernon's head fell forward. Chains clinked softly as he was led away. Justice did not shout. It simply ended things. 3 weeks later, they gathered at the Kess Ranch. Grass had begun to grow where flames once scorched the earth. New fence posts stood straight. The barn wore fresh paint. People came with food, with music, with laughter carried gently on the wind. No speeches, only peace. Thorne leaned against the porch rail, watching Nico ride slow circles on a new horse. The boy sat easy in the saddle now, confident. Alara stepped beside him, a letter folded in her hand. "It's from Washington," she said. "The Land Restoration Act passed. Every territory affected by Slate's fraud is being reopened." She smiled softly. "The Kess land is officially yours again." Thorne released a breath he'd been holding for years. "He died trying to erase a name," he said quietly. "And here we are, carving it back into the earth." Alara folded the letter. "Truth doesn't die, Thorne. It just waits for someone brave enough to speak it." He turned toward her. And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to build. He looked once more at the boy, then toward the far horizon, where the clouds had finally broken apart. Sunlight spilled across the hills like molten gold, warming land that had known too much fire. Later that evening, Nico carried a flat stone up the ridge and placed it beneath the old oak tree that overlooked the valley. The carving was simple. "Caleb Kess, Isha. They loved this land and taught me how to stand." He knelt in the tall grass, fingers tracing the letters. "I hope you can see this," he whispered. "I hope you know. We made it." Behind him, Thorne Kess waited quietly. "Ready?" he asked, his voice gentle. Nico rose and nodded. "I'm going to stay," the boy said. "Help rebuild. Maybe plant something." Thorne smiled softly. "Your father would have liked that." "I know," Nico said. As the sun slipped behind the mountains, the last of the visitors rode out. Wagons creaking, dust drifting behind them like fading memories. That night, Thorne and Alara Whitcomb sat on the porch, boots propped on the railing, the smell of coffee floating out from the kitchen. "I used to think this place was cursed," Alara said quietly. "It wasn't," Thorne replied. "It was just waiting for the right people to fight for it." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He looked out across the land stretching into dusk. Now it remembers. The Kess Ranch didn't become a legend. It didn't need to. It became something rarer. It became home again. And in the hush of the desert wind, long after the fires were buried and the trials were finished, the land finally spoke back. Not with fear, not with silence, but with roots, with growth, and with a kind of truth no man could ever burn away. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for being here and letting this story live within your heart. If it moved you, I hope you'll walk beside us through more journeys of the Wild West, stories filled with truth, endurance, and grace. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and stay close. Together, we'll keep riding across these wide-open lands of memory and hope. Thank you. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. Our narratives bring inspiration from the past, recreated with fictional and dramatized interpretations for entertainment purposes only. AI tools serve as creative support, but the storytelling, editing, and emotional refinement are handled by our team to guarantee authenticity. We comply with content policies for AI use, avoiding impersonations, identity fabrication, or historically misleading images. All visual and audio content is legally sourced. Redistribution or modification requires prior written approval. Thank you for honoring creativity, collaboration, and storytelling done with heart.